The $100 million superstar who lives like nobody expected. Nikola Jokic has earned the kind of money that could buy almost anything on earth, but somehow, one of basketball's richest superstars still seems happiest standing beside a horse in a quiet Serbian town. No endless parade of supercars, no obsession with celebrity nightlife, no desperate attempt to turn every MVP trophy into another luxury brand. While NBA fame keeps getting bigger around him, Jokic keeps returning to something remarkably simple: family, Sombor, and the horses that mattered to him long before America knew his name. And that contrast becomes almost unbelievable when you look at the money. Jokic signed a massive long-term deal with the Denver Nuggets after previously receiving another major extension, putting hundreds of millions of dollars in NBA salary within his career trajectory. Add endorsement partnerships and his growing global profile, and you are looking at a man with financial security. Most people could never imagine. He has been an NBA champion, a finals MVP, and a multiple-time league MVP. By every traditional measure, Jokic reached the level where superstar excess would surprise absolutely nobody. Yet the strangest part of his story is what happened when serious NBA money first changed his life. Jokic did not immediately chase the Ferrari that people might expect from a newly wealthy athlete. He bought a horse. Dreamcatcher came first. He also paid off the Toyota he had from his days playing for Mega. That detail sounds almost too perfect because it captures the contradiction at the center of Jokic's life. The bank account changed dramatically, but his definition of happiness apparently did not. And the deeper you go, the stranger and more revealing the story becomes. Because Jokic does spend money, he understands exactly what his basketball value is, and his career decisions show that he is far from careless about finances. But instead of using wealth primarily to create a superstar image, he appears to use it to protect the life he already wanted. That means returning to Sombor. It means family. And above almost everything else, it means horses. So how does a player who reached the absolute summit of professional basketball remain emotionally attached to a lifestyle that existed before the championships, MVP trophies, and enormous contracts? That may be the real secret behind Nikola Jokic. Before we uncover it, tell me where you're watching from your city, state, or country. If you believe money can buy comfort but cannot buy genuine happiness, come on. Or if you think massive wealth eventually changes everyone, come on, do and subscribe. Because the deeper we go into Jokic's private world, the more surprising this story becomes. How rich is Nikola Jokic? Really? Before you can understand how unusual Nikola Jokic's lifestyle is, you have to understand just how enormous the money actually is. This is not a story about a millionaire trying to stay humble. This is about a player whose NBA earnings have climbed into a financial tier most athletes never reach. Jokic's rise in Denver completely changed the value attached to his name. After entering the league as the 41st pick, he eventually earned a 5-year maximum extension worth $148 million. Then came the contract that pushed everything into another universe, a massive 5-year Supermax agreement originally reported at $264 million and later valued at more than $276 million as league economics shifted, put those contracts together. And the numbers become almost absurd. Hundreds of millions in NBA salary. Annual earnings climbing past $50 million. Seasons where a single year of basketball pays more than most families could accumulate across generations. And basketball salary is only part of the picture. Jokic has endorsement relationships with companies including Panini, Western Union, Expedia Group, and 361 Degrees. Yet even here, his behavior looks different from the normal superstar blueprint. During some of the most dominant years of his career, Jokic did not seem obsessed with maximizing his commercial image. He was not constantly launching clothing brands, pushing celebrity partnerships, or chasing every endorsement opportunity available. When he eventually signed a signature shoe partnership with 361 Degrees, the explanation attributed to him focused heavily on respect, comfort, and product quality, rather than simply the biggest possible check. That tells you something important. Jokic understands money. He simply does not seem interested in allowing money to become his personality. Outside estimates in the source material place his net worth around $120 million, though exact private wealth cannot be known with certainty. Either way, the bigger point remains unchanged. Jokic possesses the financial power to live almost any lifestyle imaginable. Private jets, luxury compounds, exotic cars, celebrity parties. A global business empire, he could choose all of it, but the strangest part of Jokic's story is that as his income exploded, his desires appeared to remain almost stubbornly familiar. The money became bigger. The man did not seem to, and nothing illustrates that better than what he chose to buy. When NBA wealth first became real, the first thing he bought wasn't a Ferrari. For many athletes, the first truly massive paycheck becomes a symbol, a supercar, a mansion, a watch worth more than a house. For Nikola Jokic, it was a horse. That single detail might explain his personality better than any statistic, interview, or championship celebration ever could. In the source material, Jokic reflected on the moment his first major contract changed life for his family. Once real financial security arrived, one of his earliest meaningful purchases was a horse named Dreamcatcher. He also paid off the Toyota he had owned during his earlier playing days. Not replaced it, paid it off. That is what makes the story so memorable. A future MVP finally had life-changing NBA money and still was not thinking about showing the world that he had made it. He was thinking about a horse and a car he already owned. The symbolism is almost impossible to miss. For Jokic, money seems to function less like a scoreboard and more like protection. It creates security, it gives his family freedom, it allows him to invest in the things he already cared about before fame arrived. That is very different from saying he rejects wealth. He does not. He negotiates huge contracts. He understands his value. He accepts the rewards that come from being one of the best basketball players alive. But once the money reaches him, it does not seem to trigger the lifestyle transformation people expect. And that is what makes his story so compelling. His first horse was not a random luxury purchase. It connected directly to something that had already been part of his life for years. The same was true of returning home. The same was true of his loyalty to family. The same was true of the quiet routines that existed before the NBA ever cared about him. The wealth did not create a new identity. It funded the old one. That is a completely different way of looking at success. For Jokic, becoming rich did not appear to mean escaping where he came from. It gave him the freedom to return there on his own terms. And once you understand what Sombor means to him, the entire story begins to make much more sense. Sombor is the place fame could never replace. For Nikola Jokic, home is not a luxury address in Los Angeles or a private waterfront property in Miami. Home is Sombor, a relatively small city in northern Serbia, close to the borders of Hungary and Croatia. Sombor is far removed from the world of NBA celebrity. It is quieter, slower, more familiar. And that seems to be exactly why Jokic keeps going back. He was born there in 1995 and grew up surrounded by family, including his parents, brothers, and grandmother, long before cameras followed him through NBA arenas. Sombor was where his identity was formed. That connection never disappeared. While many global athletes eventually build their entire lives around the places where fame takes them, Jokic appears to have kept Serbia at the emotional center of his world. Denver is where he works. Sombor is where he resets. That distinction matters. The source describes his property back home, less like a celebrity palace and more like a working ranch. There are open spaces, horse stables, training area, and land connected directly to the interests he has carried since childhood. Even the descriptions of the home itself emphasize simplicity, family gathering areas, warm materials, open layouts, comfort, not excessive decoration designed to impress strangers. And that philosophy appears to come directly from the Jokic family. His father, Branislav, has described Nikola as someone who has always preferred simple things. The family's plans revolve around homes, horses, len, and a hippodrome, rather than creating a public symbol of wealth. That tells you something about where Jokic's values came from. He did not become modest because modesty became good branding. This appears to be the environment he came from, and Sombor has never stopped treating him like one of its own. When Denver won the NBA championship, people in his hometown gathered around the local racing scene to celebrate. Supporters wore his image, signs welcomed him home. The connection between Jokic and Sombor became almost symbolic. One of the world's greatest basketball players still emotionally belonged to a place that existed long before any MVP trophy. That is why he returns so quickly after season's end. Fame pulled him across the world. Money gave him every reason to relocate permanently, but Sombor remained the one place that never needed to impress him. And at the center of that connection is the obsession that explains him better than almost anything else. The horses. His ranch tells you everything about him. If you want to understand Nikola Jokic without listening to a single interview, Look at where he puts his money. Not into a nightclub, not into a showroom filled with exotic cars. Into land, into stables, into horses, into space where his family can live and where the routines he loves can continue without interruption. That is why the ranch in Serbia matters so much to this story. It is not simply property, it is a physical version of Jokic priorities. The source describes the land as something closer to a mini ranch than a conventional celebrity residence. There are professionally maintained stables, training grounds, and open acreage. The environment is built around horses and family rather than spectacle, and that distinction is important. Most luxury spending is designed to be seen. Jokic's spending appears designed to be used. That may be the biggest difference. He has enough money to build anything he wants, and what he seems to want is a place where he can return to the life he already understands. Even stories from people who have visited the stable reinforce the point. One account describes a horse facility maintained so carefully that a visitor familiar with horses was struck by how clean it was. That is not passive ownership. That is attention, time, routine, responsibility. It suggests that Jokic is not treating horses like a wealthy man collecting expensive hobbies. He is emotionally invested, and the same is true of the larger property. The money did not create some fantasy version of success. It removed limits from a lifestyle that had always appealed to him. That may explain why he looks so disconnected from traditional celebrity expectations. Jokic does not appear to be resisting luxury out of principle. He simply seems more interested in something else. Peace, family, animals, familiarity, and a sense that his life still belongs to him. That is a powerful idea for someone operating in one of the loudest sports leagues on earth. Because the more famous Jokic becomes, the more unusual that private world looks. But the horses take that contradiction even further. They are not just where he spends money, they are where he shows emotion in ways basketball rarely seems to unlock. Horses matter to him more than trophies. Nikola Jokic has won some of the biggest prizes basketball can offer. NBA championship, finals MVP, multiple league MVP awards, Olympic medal. Yet some of his most emotional public moments have happened nowhere near an NBA arena. They happened around horses. That contrast is one of the most fascinating parts of his personality. When Denver won the championship in 2023, Jokic's reaction became famous because of how understated it was. The work was finished. He wanted to go home. No massive emotional performance. No attempt to make the moment feel bigger than it already was. Just completion. Then compare that with how he has reacted when one of his horses succeeds. The source describes an occasion when one of his horses won a major race in Serbia. Jokic reportedly ran onto the track, embraced the people involved, became emotional, and celebrated with champagne. Think about how strange that is. One of the greatest basketball players alive wins the NBA championship and looks almost relieved to leave. A horse wins a race, and suddenly the emotion spills out. That does not mean basketball means nothing to him. His competitiveness makes that impossible, but it does suggest that basketball and horses occupy very different emotional spaces. Basketball may be the arena where Jokic expresses mastery. Horses may be the place where he feels completely himself. And this love did not begin once he became wealthy. It goes back to childhood, long before Denver, long before the draft, long before anyone knew he would become an MVP. That is why the horses matter so much to the story. They are proof that the things giving Jokic joy today existed before the money. His wealth simply allowed him to expand them, more space, better facilities, more horses, greater freedom to spend time around the world of harness racing. And even during NBA travel, that interest follows him. The source describes Jokic looking forward to opportunities to visit racing facilities while on the road. This is not an off-season personality. It is part of who he is, which leads to the strangest pattern of all. No matter how enormous the basketball accomplishment becomes, Jokic always seems to find his way back to the track. NBA champion by night, horseman by heart. The pattern repeats so often that eventually it stops looking like a coincidence. Win something huge, finish the media obligations, go home, find the horses. That seems to be Nikola Jokic's cycle. After Serbia captured Olympic bronze in Paris, the source describes him returning home and quickly appearing around horse racing again. After winning the NBA championship, he was already thinking about whether he could make it back in time for races. Even MVP recognition has collided with this world. One of the most memorable images associated with Jokic's off-court personality involves him accepting major basketball recognition while surrounded by the rural environment he actually prefers. That image tells you everything. The trophy belongs to the NBA, the setting belongs to Jokic, and the more you look at his career, the more obvious the tension becomes. The NBA keeps trying to place him inside the standard superstar story. MVP, champion, Global icon, historic contract, one of the highest paid athletes alive, but Jokic keeps escaping the frame. He does not seem particularly interested in becoming a celebrity symbol when he is home. He is around family and friends. He attends races. He spends time with horses. He often avoids unnecessary media attention. There is something almost radical about that. Not because living quietly is extraordinary by itself, but because maintaining that lifestyle becomes harder the more famous a person becomes. Jokic has reached a level where everything he does can become content, yet the source repeatedly describes him trying to keep parts of his life outside that machine. No constant cameras around the stable, no elaborate ranch reality show, no aggressive branding of his private interests. The horses seem valuable precisely because they are not basketball. They give him a world where being an MVP is not the most important thing about him, and perhaps that is why he appears so balanced despite carrying enormous professional pressure. Many athletes struggle to separate identity from performance. Jokic appears to have built that separation naturally. Basketball is something he does at an extraordinary level, but it is not necessarily the only place where he knows who he is. That may sound simple. It is not, especially when hundreds of millions of dollars in global fame are constantly trying to convince you otherwise. Quiet lifestyle, ruthless business mind. Here is where the story becomes more complicated. Nikola Jokic may live simply, but that does not mean he is careless about money. In fact, the source presents almost the opposite picture. Behind the quiet personality is someone who understands financial leverage extremely well. That matters because it destroys the easy stereotype. Jokic is not a man who ignores money. He appears to know exactly what his value is. The difference is that he does not need to show it off. Contract timing is the clearest example. The source discusses how delaying certain extension decisions could potentially position Jokic to secure significantly more guaranteed money in the future. Waiting can create leverage. Waiting can increase the possible contract size. Waiting can change the financial structure of the next deal. That is not accidental. That is strategy, and it reveals a completely different side of Jokic. He may appear uninterested in celebrity business, but when it comes to the economics of his actual basketball career, he seems patient and deliberate. He does not need a rush. He does not need to announce his leverage. He simply has it. That quiet confidence mirrors the way he plays. On the court, Jokic rarely looks hurried. He waits for defenses to move. He manipulates angles. He makes decisions at the moment they become most valuable. Financially, the same idea appears in the source. Patience, timing, understanding options. That is why his simple lifestyle should not be confused with financial naivety. He can care deeply about maximizing the value of his career while still refusing to let expensive objects define his life. Those ideas are not contradictory. They may actually reinforce each other, because when you are not desperate to prove how rich you are, you can make financial decisions more patiently, and Jokic has another advantage. He has repeatedly expressed loyalty to Denver. The source cites his desire to remain a Nugget for the long term. That gives the relationship a fascinating balance. Denver knows how valuable he is. Jokic knows how much leverage he holds. And yet the public conversation rarely turns into dramatic threats or constant speculation. The negotiation can be enormous without becoming loud. That may be Jokic in one sentence. Everything important is happening. He just does not need everyone watching. Why fame never changed Nikola Jokic? Nikola Jokic's story becomes even more remarkable when you remember where it started. He was the 41st pick, not the face of a draft class, not a generational prospect marketed for years before entering the league. A second-round selection who slowly turned himself into one of the greatest players of his generation. That background matters because it helps explain why fame never seems to sit comfortably on him. Jokic did not grow up preparing to become a celebrity. He grew up around family, basketball, and horses in Sombor. Then basketball kept getting bigger. Mega Basket, Denver, All-Star appearances, MVPs, championship, global recognition, massive contracts, but the original identity remained remarkably stable. That may be why he avoided so much traditional marketing for years. While other superstars built commercial empires, Jokic often appeared reluctant to expand his public profile beyond what basketball required. Even his endorsement choices seem more selective than aggressive. And his comments about the game itself reveal the same mentality. The source describes Jokic talking about basketball less like a corporate career and more like something he still experiences as a game. That is important, because fame changes people most aggressively when their identity becomes dependent on maintaining fame. Jokic appears to have another anchor: Sombor, family, horses, a private world that existed before the NBA and will likely exist after it. That makes everything else feel temporary. Contracts expire, seasons end, awards become history. But home remains. That is probably the deepest reason his lifestyle looks so unusual from the outside. Most people assume success should change what a person wants. Jokic seems to have used success to protect what he already wanted. He did not become poor. After becoming rich, he became financially secure. He did not reject luxury, because luxury is wrong. He simply found greater value somewhere else. And that is why the image of Jokic returning to Sombor after another historic season feels so powerful. The league sees a 3-time MVP. The world sees a superstar. Denver sees the face of a franchise. But when Jokic goes home, none of those titles seem to matter as much. He is still Nikola. Still surrounded by the same landscape, still connected to the same people, still thinking about the next race. And that sets up the final question of this entire story. What can the life of one of basketball's richest and most successful players teach us about what success is actually supposed to mean? What Jokic life teaches us about success? Nikola Jokic's story is powerful because it challenges almost every assumption people make about success. He reached the highest level of basketball, signed contracts worth hundreds of millions of dollars, became an NBA champion, won multiple MVP awards, and built a resume that already places him among the defining players of his era. Yet none of those achievements seem to have rewritten the basic structure of his life. That is the lesson. Money gave Jokic freedom, but it did not appear to give him a new identity. He still returns to Sombor. He still surrounds himself with family. He still finds joy around horses. He still seems more comfortable in a stable than in the machinery of celebrity. And that does not make him careless with money. In fact, the opposite may be true. His contract decisions show patience, leverage, and an understanding of exactly what is basketball value. That combination matters. Jokic appears to know the difference between using money and being controlled by it. He can negotiate for maximum value without needing maximum attention. He can become one of the richest players in basketball without building his entire personality around proving it. He can chase championships without allowing trophies to become the only source of meaning in his life. And for Denver, that mentality may be just as important as anything he does on the court. The Nuggets have one of the rarest assets in professional sports. A generational superstar who has repeatedly expressed comfort with the organization and does not seem obsessed with chasing a bigger market simply for the spotlight. Future contract decisions will still involve enormous money and real business calculations. Jokic has every reason to protect his value. Denver has every reason to do whatever it can to keep him. But the deeper story is not about whether his next contract contains another historic number. It is about what happens after the signature. Most likely, the basketball world will debate the money. Jokic will go back to the horses, and maybe that is the most human part of his entire career. Success does not have to mean becoming someone completely different. Sometimes success means having enough freedom to become more fully the person you already were. For Jokic, wealth did not seem to create happiness from nothing. It gave him security around the things that already matter. Home, family, loyalty, privacy, and the life waiting for him outside basketball. That is a lesson bigger than sport. Know what enough means before the world starts telling you that you need more. If you believe Nikola Jokic's simple lifestyle is one of the most refreshing stories in professional sports, come on. If you think fame and wealth eventually change every superstar in some way, come on, do. And if you enjoyed this story, make sure you subscribe, like, share, and join the conversation below for more NBA stories about the players behind the headlines.